time is under the bottom of all of this. So, in terms of letting go of time, you can start to see that you need a retraining about time. A retraining which emphasizes the present moment and de-emphasizes the future and the past. I mean, I have to say in the journey, the parable of David, that's what this has been about. You know, and you have to be practical. You know, that's why I always say dialogue with your higher self, dialogue with your intuition as you're going through this. You know, if something seems impractical, if something seems too far out, too big of a stretch, say it, tell it like it is. It's not like you're going to hurt the spirit's feelings. Like, no, I'm not ready for that. It's like, okay, you know, the spirit's not going to get into an argument or a debate about that. And I know as I was going through it, for example, let's say like sustenance or survival and providence, so forth, those kind of things. I remember at one point where Jesus was talking to me and he was just saying, are you willing to question your concept of career? And I said, oh, okay, I think I could do that. Because he was saying, you know, there's a lot to this career concept. It's strung together on a timeline. It's not so much just having a series of jobs or a job, but it's like it's aiming somewhere. You're aiming for something with this career. I said, yeah, more money. And he said, yeah, I can see that. And what's that going to get you? What's, you know, if you're doing all of this to advance your career, you know, grade point average, work experiences, building a career, it's all for the money, okay? Then he's like, okay, what's that going to get you? What do you believe that's going to get you? Well, you know, I would go back and forth in that way to say, well, I think it's important, you know, and we, you know, what's it going to buy me? Well, it finally came down to kind of the bottom line was more of, it's like, well, I really want a feeling of joy, happiness, love, peace, and connectedness. And I want a relationship, and I don't know about where you live, but down here, if you're completely broke or you're in debt, that's usually not a chick magnet. You know, this is the kind of stuff you have to do with Jesus. You've got to really, like, he's coming, you see he's going in a direction, and you're saying, okay, this is what I want, and this is why the money's important, you know. You know, sure, I mean, I understand I could flip burgers at McDonald's, but that's still not appealing, I think. I don't think that's gonna be a chick magnet. You work it back and forth, and he's like, so, okay, so really this is what you want, and these things that you want are really your birthright, you know, they're your natural right, all those things. And you obviously believe you don't have them, and you want them, you want to do things to get them, and so on and so forth. And he just started to say, are you willing to start to look at your definitions of what you believe you need to do to get those things? I said, sure, I'm willing. Let's keep it, you know, open dialogue. So the more you work with it, the more you see that, okay, you're entitled to all that, but you've been going about it in the wrong way. Obviously, going about it in the wrong way. If you're not experiencing these things consistently, then whatever, you know, the best laid plans of mice and men, whatever I was doing to go about it wasn't working. So then you're open to, okay, give me some more instruction. And the more you go into that instruction, the more you do get into divine purpose. You know, that by tuning into your function, your purpose, your spiritually inspired purpose, that will be, that alignment will bring that feeling of peace, joy, connectedness, happiness, you know, all those things that you say you want, and you're willing to do all this stuff, work at all these ways to get it. And he's just saying, you know, yeah, you're entitled to it, but you're going about it the wrong way. You're really using the mechanisms of time and space to try to get an experience that's beyond time and space. You know, you're really trying to make the right moves, do the right thing, you know, plug into the right formula to get the right kind of outcomes. And he's saying that's just not going to achieve it, you know. I can guide you into perfect joy and happiness and peace and connectedness and everything, but it's kind of like in the Matrix movie, but you must do exactly as I say. You know, you need instruction. You've done decent, you've done a pretty good job, David, at trying to become a mature, functioning adult citizen in the world. You went through all this educational process. Great, you made it through preschool, kindergarten, you know, junior high, high school, and on top of high school you had to throw 10 more years full-time on top of that. So you've got undergrad and you got to graduate school. So you've gone through the educational route to achieve these things, and of course you haven't achieved that connectedness, peace, love, and joy that you really wanted. So we get at that point, we start to see that to be able to survive, I think we were driving here and Megan and Phil were talking, Phil was talking about, you know, developing a healthy ego before you transcend the ego entirely, and Megan was in the back seat going, I don't think a healthy ego is gonna, I think you could make a leap there from being an unhealthy ego even.
I said I don't think it has to be that way completely, you know, absolutely.
Yeah, positively.
Anything's possible.
Yeah.
Anytime.
So what we came to was this sense that even if you seem to meet the world on the world's terms, which I think is what Phil was talking about, in terms of basic survival skills, sustaining yourself and stabilizing what the world or Freudian psychology might call having good ego strength, where you kind of mediate between these id kind of urges and these kind of superego, moralistic, you should, ought to, somewhere in the middle, moderate. But what we found as we go deeper with this whole thing is that even if you've met the world on the world's terms, you know, seemingly somewhat stabilized emotionally, financially somewhat stabilized, and you're kind of cruising along, that's really not the pinnacle. That you really haven't, in the end, you really haven't achieved anything when you've done that. The world kind of applauds and goes, you've done very well. You've carved out a niche for yourself, you made a name for yourself, you know, you've made it. You know, like that, I will survive, you know, you've survived, and you've done it pretty good. So you've gotten pretty far along with that. Then you kind of go up, and then you meet Jesus, and Jesus goes, well, you know, you seem to be able to manage money now, and you can earn money, and you know how to save it, you know how to spend it, you seem to have a certain balance in that, you know, where you're not bouncing checks left and right, and you know, you're getting along. You learned how to kind of put one foot in front of the other and navigate a bit through time and space. You might even be kind of sophisticated, use Google Maps or MapQuest, and you know, kind of like, yeah, I'm handling. I've got it. I've got the world on a string, sitting on a rainbow. Got the string on my finger. You know, Jesus is like, I hate to tell you, but that ain't going to do it. You're not going to get into the kingdom of heaven this way. You've just met, the ego's made up a world and said, here's what you got to do to make it. And you've gone and you've said, okay, I'll do whatever it takes, I'll work hard to do it, and then you get there, and when you think you've kind of finally made it, at least in terms of normalizing and kind of succeeding in the world's terms, then you're about ready to have the bottom start falling out, if you really want to wake up. I call that, when you seem to have succeeded on the world's terms, and you've kind of made it in the world's terms, you are officially twice removed from reality.